is not a mask.
It's not covering your nose or your mouth.
Okay, if I go like this, is it not covering my nose and my mouth?
It does not. This is your mouth. We have some up front where you can practice.
Well, show me where it says it has to cover my mouth.
Okay, let me show you.
Yeah, come on.
Okay. Yeah, don't look at it. Give us 1 second.
This is so funny that I'm wearing this mask, but it's not sufficient enough. I didn't know you have to have a certain style of mask. This is awesome. I'm going to Target jail for not wearing the right mask. I love it. I know, they don't want to let me shop here because I'm not covering my mouth. They don't realize it's about compliance. It's not about the virus.
Okay.
It was good.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. This is JP and Julie over here at Book of Hours, and this is our weekly podcast called Bookmark, where we do a roundup of the week's events.
Look at that guy's face; just cracks me up every time. I can't. I've watched it 100 times and it's still funny.
He's really funny.
Yeah. He's weird too.
He's very weird. He's definitely on the spectrum.
So this guy, his name is. He calls himself a conspiracy asshole, and his channel is Conspiracy Castle, and he's on Instagram as well.
Instagram and YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's funny.
Anyway. So yeah, we have her fan this week.
Yeah, it's getting warm out.
Yeah, it's not as warm this week as last week, but it's certainly still up there. Some storms coming off the coast soon, so the weather's a little humid. I don't know. So there's that guy with the mask. There's lots of mask stuff going on out there. We're not going to cover it all because it's just overwhelming.
It's getting a little stupid anyway.
And we saw we were going to present another video with somebody, yelling at somebody else, but we decided there's enough of that. There's enough of that going on.
Stop that.
Just stop it. So
stop, you people with masks. Stop yelling at people without masks.
Speaking of people with and without masks, there's video of some Norwegians getting on a train, and they're all not wearing masks.
Yeah, they're just living their life like normal people.
All right. That's amazing.
Yeah. Just living their life like normal people.
It just feels that's what I expect every time I go outside.
Right. And then you're hit with the cults.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's in a cult.
Yeah.
So
world events.
Yeah, so these world events, and we think that everything seems to be really scheduled nice and tight, like right,
doesn't it?
Back to back.
Yeah,
right?
It's like it started on Friday or Thursday.
Yeah, maybe even as late as Saturday.
Yeah.
Because it's Monday, so we're talking about boom, 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 just in like 2 days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the first thing I think we noticed was that Australia came out.
Sweden came out.
Well, Sweden announced, so this all sort of happened literally at the same time. So the day that Sweden came out to say, we're not going to act like idiots, we're not going to act like fools, nobody's wearing a mask, we haven't really done anything different, and we're doing fine. Okay, so Sweden came out. Their officials actually came out to say that, not just some conspiracy theorists or people who were complaining. We're talking about their government officials and their health officials came out to say this. So of course mainstream picked it up, and we're talking about it. So, and then right on the heels of that, like literally you blink and it's the very next thing coming across your feed is the Berlin protests.
Right. And the press, of course, had their say in it as well. You can always rely on the mainstream media to take something and frame it in a way by leaving things out or by just adding their own spin to something and making it seem like something else is happening.
Right.
So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mean, it's just like every article that came out. So the first thing we have is we have Reuters and the New York Times, and we've got all these mainstream press going out and saying that, hey, look, this is what Sweden did. And as far as I could tell, there was no real criticism of that. And then the very next moment, you've got those same platforms, Reuters, New York Times, mainstream press, vilifying and just attacking Berlin for coming out and protesting against, everything having to do with any of the regulations around COVID, like the masking up and the closing of businesses and the killing of the economy and the social isolation and the distance, distance learning and the distance that we have to keep from each other and all that stuff. They all, about 1 million people came out, give or take, about 1 million people came out to protest that. And those same platforms are saying, ooh, look at all these neo-Nazis, look at all these conspiracy theorists, look at all these anti-vaxxers.
Right.
And it's like, you just got through supporting, basically, from what I could tell, supporting Sweden and their decision to not do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Berlin comes out and wants the same thing, you call them a bunch of conspiracy theorists and anti-vaxxers and neo-Nazis.
Right. And
seriously?
Like, 1 million people, that's a lot, and it's like there's
people that are they had their kids on their shoulders, and they were like, we just want life to go back to normal. We feel that this is really oppressive and not necessary. And we're talking the working class.
Yeah, and Germany in general has felt the oppression pretty hard. Maybe not as hard as maybe Turkey, or which never gets reported on, by the way. Turkey or Spain, some of the things that they've been doing there. We heard a story about in one part of Germany where they were the army, officers or army soldiers were going into apartment buildings and forcing their way into apartments and pulling people out and making them take tests.
Right. So that
these aren't math tests. This isn't a pop quiz.
Those are low-income housing.
Right.
So it was a low-income housing complex that was targeted by, the health officials and then the police. And so they were first they locked everybody inside, and then they went door to door to each of their apartments and forced them to take a test.
Yeah.
And
so this is it's
that was
bad,
a couple
right?
of weeks ago.
So that was a couple of weeks ago. So the Berliners and probably people from the suburbs around there, came together, and that was a huge protest, and it seemed very organic, and I think that's why it was attacked by the mainstream, because it wasn't an officially sanctioned, Soros paid for event, right?
Right.
And it was again they were okay. Let's frame it this way. There just aren't that many neo-Nazis in the world, at least
or
not
communists.
in one place. Yeah, or communists. They're spread out over the world, maybe, but I doubt it. I doubt it that very much. Yeah. Even though that's what's being lifted up, the whole conversation around white supremacists, and basically talking about everybody as being everybody who's white and as complicit and being white supremacist in their language, and this is all just hyper language, hyper reality type language, and it's out of place. And so the only thing that they can do when they see something like the Berlin protests is to attack it that way. Right.
Yeah.
And all these neo-Nazis. I mean, we even heard when say Michigan was coming out and people in Pennsylvania were coming out back in, when was that? April,
March
May?
Or April.
I think it was April and May, early May. Somebody that we knew told us that they in the photos. Okay, these are protests happening in Harrisburg, which is the other side of the state from where we live, in Pennsylvania. Saying that he saw Nazi swastika flags in the crowd, and it's like I didn't see any of that, and that's the perception people have, and that's sort of that goes along with what they call the Mandela effect and things like that.
Oh, the Mandela effect,
right?
Yeah.
And look that up on Wikipedia because I don't want to go into it, but it's that kind of you think you see something because people start talking about it, right?
Right.
And what I saw were yellow flags with snakes on them saying "Don't tread on me," and I saw American flags and on all that shit, right? So clearly on the conservative side of things, more nationalist, but not neo-Nazis, not, white supremacists. They're just average people coming out and protesting. And I think that was the same thing that was going on in Berlin, and I think people had just fucking had it.
Yeah.
And they came out, I
mean, just because the New York Times says that, some neo-Nazis came out in Berlin to protest, having to put a mask on and shelter in lockdown and all that, doesn't make it true. I mean, did you look at the actual pictures and videos? There's tons of video of these people that came out, and some people are saying that there were as many as 1 million people that came out. I'm probably thinking it was somewhere between like maybe 100,000 and 1 million. That's a big range,
right.
But I always just try to keep it real, stay realistic about it. But of the videos that I saw people of all sorts of culture, all sorts of color.
Yeah.
I saw all sorts of age ranges, from the elderly to the very young. I saw human beings coming out to say that they want their life back. That's what I saw.
Did you see any masks?
No.
No. Yeah.
Nope.
And then on the heels of that, and I want to get into the New York Times in a second, but on the heels of that was Australia, right?
Right. So it feels like when Sweden came out and made their announcement, and then Berlin came out and protested, and then Australia came out and put Victoria under house arrest, that it all happened like kind of at the same time. It was just this big like cluster of information, and it was just like, whoa, all of this kind of just boom, boom, boom. It happened like right at the same time. So it felt like.
So I don't know if I don't know. See, I don't know much about Australian politics. I don't know if the territories, are provinces or states, but they're sort of the equivalent of the United States. So Victoria is a state, and it's on the very southern tip of the continent of the country. Melbourne is this main city there.
Right.
And I thought we saw that the population was like 5 million.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember you saying that. So Melbourne is basically like the same population as Los Angeles.
That's what we were reading. I don't know how true that statistic is. It's a lot of people. I didn't know that. When I heard that number, I didn't think that Melbourne had that kind of population, because that's a big population for a country that is not that populated.
That's crazy. Yeah, that seems really.
And it's not one of the. And I thought Sydney was a bigger city, so.
Yeah.
I don't know. But as for culture-wise, it's more like LA and But a lot of music comes out of that area. But anyway, so. They locked it down. They locked it down hard.
Yeah. So basically, everybody's under house arrest. I mean, I was listening to the guy that came out and told people what they could do. You can't go to a grocery store if it's farther than 5 kilometers from your house.
That's messed up.
You can't do anything. You can't leave your house except to go to the grocery store, as long as it's 5 kilometers away. I mean,
and that's a spread out country and a spread out state.
That's very spread out.
It's
right?
a very big
That's
area.
What Australia is known for.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe this is a very concentrated.
Most of the population is along the coast. And not as many people live in the outback, as they call it. And Victoria. Like if you look at the map and you see how it kind of comes down, Tasmania is down here, and then Melbourne is like up here, and then as it comes up, then the state comes around, wraps around, and it butts up against other states. So you've got New South Wales, where Sydney is, and then I forget what's next to it. Anyway, so it's kind of a broad place, and so most of the population is along the coast. That said, it's like like California or Texas, where it's like really widespread.
And it was like 0.004% of the population had either tested positive, or had either died or something. And the day that they made the announcement, 7 elderly people, 6 of which were like over the age of 80 and over the age of 90 had died, and one of which was like over the age of 70 had died. So 7 people had died, and so that was enough for them. And they were elderly, and they had comorbidity, meaning that they had other things going on, like, I don't know, old age.
Yeah. Plus, plus it's winter there.
Right, plus it's winter there. And they took, so that 7 people just put them over the edge.
Yep.
They were like, no more of this nonsense, no more of this outrageous, out of control virus. These 7 grandmothers died, even though they were over the age of 90. It's just like, enough, so you've got to lock down literally put millions of people under house arrest.
This language around, around people dying, especially the elderly. What kills me is like, the language lately around death is like as if people just don't die ever. And oh my God, if you don't wear a mask, you're killing grandma. And let's
like, count how many times we can say that.
Right? I mean, how many times have you seen that? And it's like, okay, so people don't die? I don't get it. Like, before it was always accepted that, people do die at some age, at some time. And if you're over the age of 80, and like, especially the last 5 years, I noticed that particular generation that was 80 and above were like dropping like flies. They were all in the show business world, so they all came around, and I mean, recently, the director and writer, he works with Mel Brooks, or used to work with Mel Brooks, just recently died.
John Stepling wrote about it, I think.
And I can't remember his name now, which is a drag because, he was, pretty instrumental in a lot of the media and movies and things that, we grew up with, right? So, that generation had been dying for the last 5 years, and every once in a while you'd see them coming up, and it's just, that's the way it is. And yet the language and the attitude lately in the last year and a half has been that, people just, not even the last year and a half, in the last 6 months, for fuck's sake.
I would say the last 4 or 5 months. Well, so what's happened is, so just a little armchair psychology here, a little armchair diagnosis. Not a professional, not a psychiatrist, not a psychologist over here, just an observer. The United States is incredibly sentimental. I mean,
probably more so than Ireland, right?
Yes, maybe even more so than Ireland.
Yeah.
The Irish. So United States citizens are incredibly sentimental, and what I love is there's this one Russian girl that you follow. That
on Facebook
or that she follows you or
from San Jose.
Yeah, and she is so not sentimental. And I remember like hearing a story about how in order to this is like a legend in order and I know for a fact that this is what they do to the children in Germany because I've seen it with my own eyes. Basically, how like Russians and Germans raise their kids is they scare the fuck out of them. So they say things like they have these incredibly ridiculous like the whole business of the shoes in the house traditions. They have these really, really funny traditions where it's like if you're outside in the park or running around or you're at the store and you're the little kinder kids in Germany, you have to take your shoes off before you go inside. Now, the real reason is so that you don't get your house dirty. Right. The real reason is that, you keep your shoes on the porch, like civilized people do, and you walk around in your house shoes inside your house. And but what they tell the kids is that the evil spirits will attach themselves to the bottom of their shoes. The evil spirits will come and attach themselves to the bottom of the shoes, so you have to leave the shoes outside so the evil spirits will go away. You don't want to bring evil spirits into the house. Right. So it's all this crazy, like, fear-based, and then the kids grow up and they grow out of it. Whereas Americans get really sentimental about their dumbass traditions, and they don't let go. They don't let go of them. So we literally know people who are in their like 30s and 40s and 50s that still act like 8-year-olds. I've never seen anything like it, especially in this part of the country. Growing up in San Francisco, which is very multicultural and lots
cosmopolitan.
And very cosmopolitan, and lots of people from all over the world live there. But suddenly moving to this podunk like town on the East Coast, Pittsburgh, it's just like I would literally watch like 60-year-olds throw temper tantrums because they were sentimental about like something, and I'm just like,
I know.
What?
Well, I mean, okay, so
that might be gone off a little on the off the side there, but honestly, we're a sentimental country.
Yeah, we are. Well, okay, so Pittsburgh is really sentimental and I just want to add to what you just said to illustrate it. I was working last fall and driving around, and I started seeing Halloween going up at the end of August. Halloween turned into Thanksgiving, which turned into Christmas. I mean, it was all like one long holiday from like the beginning of September through the middle of January and into February. I have to say, if not at the end of February, there were still Christmas decorations up here and there that I would see in different parts of town. I mean, my God.
I was like, okay, is it laziness?
No, they love it. They love its sentimentality. And it tended to be the younger folks that left them up longer.
And they're all sentimental for the wrong reasons. Like, nobody's sentimental over the fact that, you're in fucking lockdown, but you're sentimental over the fact that, 2 people who were over the age of 90 died, so suddenly the whole world has to come to a complete halt.
Right.
It's like you're not sentimental over the fact that your children don't have a place to play anymore and that life is basically over.
Right. There's no place. Yeah. There's no place for the children to become, people.
To actually be children.
But grandma who and I'm not being an asshole about it. It's just that there's people die, and. You got to deal with it. I mean, our cat died just a few weeks ago. And
she was 20.
She was 20, so she was the equivalent of 90-year-old grandma.
Yeah.
And
she died.
The heat killed her, basically.
Age.
Yeah, I mean, old age, but the heat kind of like took her.
Yeah, it was a particularly hot week.
And she was a very fuzzy cat, and
whatever. She was old.
She was old, right? Exactly.
Is, I mean,
but that's the point. That's the thing. It's like we weren't going to take her to the vet because she was like on the threshold of dying. We knew that she was on her way out, but we weren't going to take her to the vet. We wanted her to be here with us, and that wasn't sentimentality. That was more like practicality, and also just like living up, owning up to the fact that, or whatever you want to call it, that these things happen.
People die.
And animals and pets that you love die,
Right.
And so, we're sad, but the thing is we were expecting it.
Right. And so this business of, I don't even know why we got on this topic about sentimentality in Americans, but it feels really important, to say, because people are getting upset over all of the wrong things.
Right. Exactly. They are getting upset over the wrong things. And we're also a very infantilized society. Right, and I think that goes hand in hand with what you're talking about.
Yeah. Watching full-grown 60-year-olds have temper tantrums is like, I'm not sure what that's about.
But I think it also plays into this whole thing with the people who are yelling at you, or the people who just have bought into the mask thing, hook, line, and sinker. They're in the cult, and they think that you're going to kill grandma. That always comes up. I don't know why.
It's weird.
Or they think that you're going to kill them by not wearing a mask, and it's like, well, actually, okay, our audience is already on board with this, but they're going to kill themselves with that mask. More.
Yeah, I mean, so the whole mask thing. I think a couple of weeks ago, I just sort of said, which is, I've always kind of come to this conclusion from the very beginning. In fact, from the very beginning of this thing, starting in March. My first thought was, oh my God, they're really doing it. Fascism has come to town. Mm-hmm. It's really happening. Now, my next thought, my secondary thought to that was, it's up to the people to make a choice. Do they fall in line and love fascism? Or do they not? Like, it's really just your choice. The mask is your choice. The vaccine is your choice. How your children are taught from this point forward, which is lifelong learning, which is our next video essay, which we'll go into a little bit of detail about it. It's an overview. If you really want detail, you need to follow Alison McDowell.
Yeah.
But we do an overview of it. So it's all choice. You can either choose to be a lazy parent and throw your kids into these systems, which will help them to develop into really excellent slaves, and they'll never be happy, and they'll never be fulfilled in life. Or you can choose to educate yourself about what's happening, about the mask, about the vaccines, about the school system, and about what's going on in the world. And you can make a choice. But honestly, it's all about your choice. Like, and I'm not going to fault people for not wanting to educate themselves. I'm not going to fault people for that, because the more I spend energy trying to get them to come over to my side, the more they pull me down to their level. So I don't really care.
Well, see, okay, so that's the other thing,
know?
that I wanted to bring up is that you, in fascism, you don't have any choice.
Right.
You don't have choices, because the people
That's true.
who become acculturated to the cult, they come indoctrinated, is a better word, to the cult, they start going after you, right?
So you just have to protect yourself.
You have to, yeah. So
avoid them.
One of the things that you mentioned reminded me, it's like we decided to stop really kind of focusing on the masks, and yet we're talking about them because it's just pervasive. Yeah. So we're not going to focus on it in these shows, in these programs. But we also told ourselves about a month or two ago that we're no longer going to talk about the virus, and yet it keeps pulling us back in, and we keep having to address it. I don't really want to talk about it, but one of the other things that happened on the heels of all these other world events was Dr. Deborah Birx. Birx. It's
Birx.
It's Birx. Yes.
It is.
It is. No, I wrote it right. It's just I read it wrong.
Yeah.
So basically, she came out and said literally, there's a new phase in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic. The virus now is more widespread than it was when
back
it first back in March. Now,
how can something that doesn't exist be more widespread?
Okay, well,
so it's more of something that doesn't exist.
You notice that it's that the wording. I took this directly from CNN. The wording was in such a way that it's like the fight against the coronavirus pandemic. Okay, so that's really wishy-washy language, right? It makes you think there are more, well, they said, one of the things they said in the headlines was like there were more cases. But the thing is it's summer, and the New York Times, I was quoting CNN, but like I said I was going to come back to the New York Times. The New York Times, just a week or two ago, had put up a graph that basically stated that, we were looking at, 0.03% of the population had died since this whole thing came out. I don't remember the exact number, but it was a chart, and it was in thousands or whatever. So you had to do the math to understand the chart, but it made it look. So here's some visual cheating, right? Made it look like it was like this huge number of people, but really all it was like, I don't know, something like around 38,000 people in the United States. It wasn't very many people. And so they use this language and the way that they say things, the way they do sort of language jujitsu to make it sound like it's something really horrible when really it's not. And they're coming out in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic. She didn't say COVID. She didn't say coronavirus, deaths. She said the pandemic, which it's not a pandemic, because if you look around, you don't see bodies in the street. Okay.
I know, people don't even know what words mean.
Right.
Honestly,
it's
people
not.
Don't.
It's not the Spanish flu of 1918 or whatever year.
And
that
even
was.
then, like the anti-mask defamation league was formed.
There was an anti-mask league, in San Francisco. Right?
San Francisco.
Yeah, because of that, because people.
They were like, "Fuck the mask!" Back when San Francisco had teeth.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, we just went through the 1906 earthquake and we were just flattened because of that, and now you want to try to tell us we have a fake virus.
Right.
Get out of here.
People were dying. I mean,
yeah, that's true. People were dying.
And you saw evidence of it much more than you are now. In fact, we had a conversation out the back porch of our house last evening. A guy was coming down the steps in the building next door to us. It's an apartment building, and he's an electrician, and he was coming down and he had a mask around his chin, and he's like, ugh. He's like, this virus is killing me, and I was like,
in what way? Are you sick?
I said, yeah, exactly. What's going on? And he says, well, I'm an electrician and I'm self-employed, and first of all, it cut down my business, and second of all, people don't want me coming into their house around their children because they think they're going to get sick because people are dying. And I said, yeah, I don't know about that. I literally said that. I said, no, I don't know about that. And he's like, somebody was telling me that this is a political thing and that it's all a scam. And he's like, I don't know anybody who's ever died from it. And I said, go with that.
Yep.
And Julie chimed in.
Yep,
and said,
go with that.
That's definitely what you need to go with.
Yeah, because so the only reason he said that was because you showed some skepticism about the virus itself. So everybody's skeptical, and all they're looking for is that one opening.
Right.
And if they do talk to someone about it, they're gauging how that person is going to respond to them. Because you said, yeah, well, you were very skeptical about it, very non-committal about it, which gave him that opening to share that information with you. Well, this other guy I was talking to asked me outright, do you know anybody who's had it or has died of it?
Mm-hmm.
No? Well, neither have I.
Right.
This is political.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's more than political.
Right.
It's way more than political.
We
if
knew
you
that
follow our channel, you know this.
Yeah.
But for him...
Yeah, we weren't going to go into it with him, but
right. But
not
for
the details.
him, it's like, yes, go with that. Go
Right.
with that, because chances are you'll start to learn some things.
So in your daily conversations, you can find those openings.
Yeah.
And we've been finding these openings here and there from the beginning. Because remember when this thing first started happening and they locked down downtown, or they closed downtown, and we were going around recording for quarantining.
For quarantining,
and it was still fucking cold out, and
it was cold.
We were waiting
out.
for the bus, and we were talking to these guys, and was that magnets?
Yeah, I know, right? It's like playing with the magnets on the table, and all of a sudden they started moving on their own.
And on something I didn't expect to see a magnet on.
Yeah, because the...
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, sorry, folks. Off-camera fun. Anyway, so we started talking to these guys, these two older black guys, and they were just like, they were hanging out. And I don't think they were homeless, but they were just like, they didn't have anything else to do, so they were hanging out on the bus stop. And we were talking to them, and they were talking about how they were, concerned not about the virus, but about how they were going to feed their family and how they're going to pay the rent and all that kind of stuff. It was like the real life things that were the problem. And, and again, that's something that we find, and we say this over and over again, but I'm going to re-emphasize this. The people who are on the ground, okay, and the people who are living life, the real life, this is a very poor community that we have moved into. And the only reason that I see people wearing masks or keeping them handy is because they have to wear them to go into the store, or they have to wear them in their shit-ass job. And so that's, but only the younger kids I've noticed have been like more indoctrinated into like wearing it all the time.
Like the 20-somethings.
Yeah, and they're going to McDonald's and they're wearing it on the bus. We get on the bus, we do not wear a mask, and I've not had to say I have a medical exemption for the last few times that we've gotten on the bus. I only got hassled once, and the guy was wearing a mask. And I just threw it back to him, and it wasn't a big deal. There was no fight, there was nothing. But I've noticed that people do wear them on the bus. And again, I think that part of it is that they're the kind of folks that are crushed down, and so they're going to obey the rules in the official places, right? Like on the bus or in the store or in the restaurant. But here around the area where we live, you see them walking around in the alleys and on the street, and you don't see it as much.
No.
The people who are wearing them are the younger ones who are walking down the street, and the older folks are not. And so I think that it's this kind of like.
Is it ageist? Is it ageism?
I think that it's the level of obedience comes with the downtrodden aspect, but then when they're living their lives, they don't obey. The kids have been indoctrinated more,
right?
And I think that's what's explaining that. I really don't. We're being armchair sociologists and anthropologists here, and psychologists too, I suppose. But these are observations that we've made, right? And so that is data. That is information that you can use, and if you track it, properly, then you can, you now have, an arc of a trend of information. So we are not statisticians either, but, again, you start collecting the information, you get a sample, you start seeing a trend.
Yeah, that's true.
But then when you go into the wealthier communities, like especially if we go into town, not as much downtown, because it's still kind of dead down there.
It's dead.
But if you get into the university areas and the areas where the museums, see, again, all those are closed, but a lot of people live in that area, and you see a lot more masks being worn.
Sure.
In those areas, because there's more affluence and more liberalism, as it were.
Yeah, it really is.
The more liberal the politics.
But then you get like the local, the managerial class here.
Mm-hmm.
That the second that the governor of Pennsylvania came out and said, I'm going to close all businesses and I'm going to close this, and it was even before the mask thing became a thing. The second that he said that, which was like mid-March, the managerial class split. They split and they drove the 8 hours, and they went and lived for the next 2 or 3 months in South Carolina in their second homes by the beach. And why is that? Because South Carolina never locked down. They never put a mask on. So they never really. So they lived like it was an extended vacation.
Right. Yeah, we actually have an example of that. Somebody we know.
2 people actually.
2 people. Yeah. Okay. That actually went and did that. And it's like, well, yeah, because they had to work from home anyway.
Right.
So they might as well work remotely from
a place where they don't have to lock down, where they don't have to wear a mask, where they don't have to socially isolate,
and they didn't have to deal with the cold weather.
Right. So so starting early March, mid-March, all the way up until Pennsylvania sort of was quasi-opened again before it went bipolar, open, close, open, close, open, close. Nobody knows. So from March until June, they were gone in South Carolina at their second homes on the beach. So even though you walk around these more liberal, I wouldn't say affluent, I mean...
some of those neighborhoods out towards Liberty are in between the Oakland and East Liberty, there's some pretty big houses out there.
That's true. So some of those people that are still there that never went away, they just put on the mask and follow the rules because they're liberals, and that's and this is they live in that little blue island of blue privilege, and everything else that surrounds them is like poverty. So they live in this little bubble of submission and subservience and fear and blue and all that stuff.
Right.
Whereas everybody else is poor,
and they don't question the fact that their presidential candidate is wearing a mask all the time.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back to Deborah Birx. Birx. I don't know why I read it as Birx, but anyway.
It's okay.
Maybe like BRICS countries, or I don't know. Anyway, but I wanted to go back to her because, because of the spin and the sort of like half truths that she's like saying. She started talking about goggles now, and because Fauci was talking about goggles, and apparently there's 2 things I want to mention, and the first one was okay. So linked to her directly and Fauci. Is this coronavirus versus the COVID-19 label. Okay, so we have 2 labels, right? And coronavirus is just the generic virus, right? It's the one that they're talking about, and it feels like it's always interchangeable, and it's really weird. It's like the novel coronavirus, and then they talk about COVID-19. Now there is a difference, and the difference is this. Apparently, because I don't think it's stuck with the public that they understand this, and so they try to create this complicated differentiation, because what they're trying to do is saying that COVID-19 is a disease that you get after you pick up the coronavirus, okay? And the COVID-19 is the thing that they're saying that people are dying from. See, this is what allows them to attribute COVID-19 deaths to somebody that died of a fucking heart attack.
Right.
Okay? They got hit by a bus. COVID-19. Well, because they had the virus. Okay, so it allows them to say, well, there's this disease that's associated with coronavirus, even though, you know, these people are dying of, like, say, pneumonia, which is not a virus, which is a, you know, it's you know, it's not a virus that causes pneumonia. But it's associated with the fact that the virus actually brought down their, it's an infection. It brings down their immune system, and then this other thing can happen. So then they just package that thing up and go, oh, COVID-19. Okay.
Right.
Even though this kind of shit has been happening for generations and decades and centuries and millennia, right? So there's a correlation here and the reason I brought up Birx and Fauci is because they were associated with the AIDS epidemic. They called that one an epidemic, by the way. So the virus was HIV, right? It was a virus of the blood. But you died of AIDS, okay? So AIDS was the disease and HIV was the virus. And they did that, you know, back in the late 80s, early 90s. And maybe even the mid 80s. I remember living through it, and I remember being in San Francisco, and I remember seeing the waste case, you know, the cases of you know, people wasting away, men, you know, looking like they were haggard old 90-year-old men who were probably 40.
Right.
And I don't want to get into all that right now. But what I'm trying to say is that they were saying that they were dying of the disease, AIDS, rather than the virus. That you acquired the virus and then you were HIV positive or HIV negative, and we're starting to see that kind of language play out with Corona now too, right? So you go to the test and you're positive or you're negative.
Yep.
You know,
they're not very creative.
They're not very creative, and I think what happened is that
playbook.
You know, because a blood disease or a blood-borne virus is harder to imagine than something like a cold or the flu. That people bought into that HIV versus AIDS. I almost said coronavirus. AIDS. So it was easier to like mentally make that shift and go, oh, right, okay, even though none of us still really, unless we're in the medical field, really quite understand the difference, right? Now, the COVID-19 versus coronavirus, it's like, well, you know, it's harder to make that shift mentally because we know what the flu is. We know what a virus is. We know what a head cold is. And the coronavirus is basically, you know, like that. But now they're saying, oh, but now we have this disease called... So you see what I'm saying? They're trying to package these things up, create a new set of words and phrases around this stuff so that this thing can fucking last forever.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're still living...
the rest of your life.
Right, because we're still living with AIDS, right? AIDS still exists. So
sort of,
why not?
Really,
well, I know, but they're still using it as a means of like scaring people from having sex, right?
I guess.
So now you've got this thing that's scaring people from living their lives,
from being a human being, right. And this is it for the rest of your life. This is how it's going to be.
And COVID is going to be with us forever.
It's going to be with you forever. I mean, this is your new normal. And it's something that I said, you know, back in March when I turned to him and said, okay, they've really done it. They've really done it. They've created a whole new paradigm on how, you know, based on how we are going to live our lives from this point forward. And they're using the swine flu pandemic and the AIDS pandemic. They're using the same models and the same marketing,
the same playbook
campaigns and the same playbook as they did with these other ones. And because they're not that creative, they're actually kind of stupid. When you listen to Deborah Birx talk, she has a hard time articulating her words. It takes a while for her to get the words out. Bill Gates sounds like a fucking Neanderthal. He sounds like an idiot.
Right.
You know, all of these people are incredibly stupid. They can't even come up with anything creative. This is the same playbook that they used, like I said, with the swine flu and with AIDS, down to the positive negative thing. I mean, it's stupid. So you either believe it You choose to play along with these games,
right.
or you just...
Well, they tried it with SARS and the bird flu thing.
Yeah, I mean,
they tried it
it's so stupid.
Yeah, and this is the first time I think they've been able to...
Zika and all that stuff.
Right? Yeah, Zika.
I mean...
That one was messed up too, right? Zika, it was like, oh, well, pregnant women in Brazil are blah, 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 blah. And I wasn't buying it.
Yeah.
You know, even though I was a lot less, aware of things, that just didn't sound right.
Right. So, this is it, though. And you can either choose to, again, twist yourself up into a pretzel, shut down your entire life, destroy your own legacy, not leave anything for your children, enroll your kids in school and have them turn into slaves, waste away behind a mask where you're breathing in your own toxins. That's all your choice. That's
right.
Your choice. That's you. Your choice.
Right.
Deborah Birx and Fauci and Gates and Trump and your governor and your local municipality didn't tell you to do any of this. You chose to do it. None of it was legal when they said you need to do these things. There was no law that said you had to, but you chose to do it anyway. So I'm sorry. I'm tough love here,
Well, the other thing that I want to tie into, I think next week we're going to talk more about our upcoming video called Lifelong Learning. But some of what we talk about in there, what we talk about are social impact bonds and social impact investing. And it does tie into these health crises, okay? Because what was that disease in Africa? Not Zika, but the one that was like killing people.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember the name of it. Like people would bleed out and through all orifices.
Yeah, I'm gonna find it.
Yeah, so
that was a good one.
Yeah, that was a good one because it allowed them to go in and start vaccinating people. Testing out some of these this playbook and testing out some of these vaccines and things. But what actually did happen along the lines of social impact investing and social impact bonds, and you can look these things up, even in Wikipedia, they'll talk about them. They created social impact bonds to help pay for this virus that was attacking Africa. And what was taking place was the investment created a pool of money that allowed them to hire companies and service providers to go out and provide these medical treatment centers and
Ebola.
Okay. Anyway, so they created so they had vaccines, they had these medical treatment centers, they had all the gloves and all the paraphernalia, right, that goes along with that, and they set these up out in Africa. And the thing is a lot of those didn't necessarily get used. However, but because they were delivered, the services were rendered, the products were delivered, the money then came back to the investors who had invested in these bonds. So money is being made on these crises, right? Whether they're real or not, and whether the services and the products are necessarily needed or not, the money comes back from the investment of the bond that was created, okay? Same thing is going on with COVID, right? Now, that there were all these centers out there that were out to test people, and
we had to empty the hospitals,
and we had to empty the hospitals, right? And they had these field centers out there, and there were crickets, literally out in a lot of these things.
Everything was empty.
And if you've noticed now, those places aren't around for now the testing that people are lining up for in their municipalities, right? They're waiting at City Hall in 2-hour lines to get a test for something. Where did all those treatment centers go? See, they were delivered. The products were delivered, the masks and the gloves and all that kind of stuff. That was all delivered. And yet, what did it do? Nothing. Right? People didn't show up for it. It wasn't needed. Those things weren't necessary. But people made money on the fact that they were provided, they were delivered, and
it was like check,
and
right? And then you scratch off the check, and they get paid.
Right.
And you, the person who maybe want to get tested or want the medication or whatever, you have nothing to do with this exchange of goods for services,
right,
or payment for services or payment for goods. It's kind of like voting. You have nothing to do with the outcome of who becomes president or who becomes your, governor or who becomes your representative or whatever, or your senator. You have nothing to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. And what's going on is right now the investments are taking place, but in the future, maybe now going forward and in the future, all these things are going to be registered on a blockchain ledger, okay, so that these things are recorded and they the record never goes away. And then it will come back onto what is known as a dashboard, which is basically an interface that shows you, the investment made, how many people bought into it, how many paid this, and the people that were hired to do that and the other thing, and then the investment that came back, the return on investment and that profit. Okay, and all these things then are demonstrated on this dashboard. So this whole social impact investing is going to be basically the future of the economy, and we talk about it generally in our upcoming video, Lifelong Learning, because it has everything to do with education and employment, as well as our health in the coming years and in the rest of our lives. So it's important to know what that is. We talk about Alison McDowell and her site Wrench in the Gears. Look her up, and then you can also look up some of these terms: social impact investing, social impact bonds, on Wikipedia, and it'll give you a rundown of what that thing is.
I mean, this seems more real to me. Everything that he just said seems more real to me than a virus.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
because I can see how that system works. I've actually been on a dashboard before. We've all been on boards before. We've also, a lot of us have been in marketing, and a lot of us have been in retail, where we had to order things in order to justify a budget. In order to justify my own paycheck as a manager of, say, a retail shop, I would have to make sure that I ordered enough based on last year's numbers, say around Christmas time. So last year at Christmas time, I sold, $600,000 worth of product. So this year, I want to make sure that I order that same amount of product, maybe a little bit more, and sell it, hire the right team, hire the right marketing people to sell the product. That way, my paycheck and my marketing team's paycheck is justified.
Right.
So it's the same concept, but instead of selling, Christmas candles, we're selling human beings. We're selling capital. We're selling our health data. We're basing so they have to inflate these COVID numbers. They have to say, well, let's see, in 2020, we sold, 800 million cases of COVID. Therefore, for 2021, we need to also purchase this. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's the same concept. If you have the slightest bit of retail experience or the slightest bit of marketing or management experience, then this should all make much more sense to you than having to stand 6 feet apart from someone when you go and buy Kleenex or toilet paper.
Right. So
that doesn't make any sense to me. But
that has something to do with other things.
But the budget, the budget and everything that he just talked about makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So,
and a lot of times these bonds are created to solve a problem that hasn't yet been identified or created. And so
that's a behavioral futures market.
Right, and we'll get into that. Maybe next week we can talk about that in regard to our video that's coming out, because we're kind of we're not sure about the release date yet, but we're kind of getting to that point where we're gonna try for next week, but
our goal. First of all, we want to get it out before school starts, because it's about education.
Yeah.
So we need for parents who are enrolling their kids in school to see it. So we're looking at either an August 7th or an August 8th release date. We pretty much finished up the script. Now we're just looking for the supporting graphics and music, and we're waiting to get back. We're waiting to hear back from somebody about a perfect song that we have that we found. But it is something that we need to get permission for, so we may not be able to use it.
Yeah.
But so we're just doing some technical stuff now.
Yeah.
And so I don't see why we couldn't have it.
Yeah, you're right. You're true.
We couldn't have it available for people.
I hate to overpromise.
Yeah, by August 7th or August 8th.
So, speaking of that, and I have one more subject I want to talk about, but speaking of that, if you want to see it when it is actually released, you can support us by going to our Patreon page and becoming a patron. And as little as $2 a month, you will get early access before we launch
before we make it public.
Yeah, before we make it public. You can also go to paypal.me/bookofhours and make a one-time contribution, and we'll put you down for seeing the video when
we'll
it's released.
Send you a private link so you can have it.
Exactly.
Now, we've done this for people who have donated money to our PayPal page, and so we've emailed them the private link. And we think that they might be sharing that private link to their friends, or maybe putting it on their Facebook page. So all we ask is that if you do get a private link to something from us, just keep it to yourself. Yeah, I mean, this is how we earn our living. Right. This is what we do for a living. And it's,
and we want to reward people for supporting us. So, we want to make sure that stays a premium, right, for you. So sharing it with other people doesn't really, benefit you, and other people who give us money as well. So,
it's cool though because
we're happy that people are that excited and eager to share our work.
And please go to our YouTube page. Everything that's on our YouTube channel, on our Book of Hours YouTube channel, which is where you're watching this right now, is you can share it to infinity because it's all open and it's all public.
Right.
And YouTube seems to be okay with it so far.
Right.
So
we haven't been yanked off yet.
Well, that's the beauty of being creatives and also having a marketing strategy is that we know how to circumvent some of the language that might be getting
so far.
Might be alerting the algorithms to get some videos taken down. But I'm not, knock wood. I'm not saying that I'm. That I know exactly how to circumvent those things because they are pretty aggressive.
Yeah, they're getting aggressive. I mean, we've talked about this before. Our other channel, or other platform, Vimeo, has been taking down our videos, and
we've been paying them to censor us.
And we pay them. Yeah, we pay them
to censor us.
Yeah, isn't that cute? Yeah, and then they won't even talk to us about it. So So one more thing, talking about like the fact that we don't want to talk about the virus, but yet it keeps coming back. Apparently, Julie, viruses can be hiding in your ears.
Yes, so it would be, see, hear, speak, no evil. Yeah, just like the little monkeys.
The little monkeys. So you're going to have to start buying earplugs, apparently, along with goggles.
Right.
And a face covering here.
Yeah. So basically, it's this dehumanization protocol. It's dehumanization. If you've ever been in a cult, or if you've ever had parents, this is a big part of
ever had parents
this is especially American parents, this is a big part of like growing up in America is how to break a person down in order to build them up in your image. And so what they want is to break us down, dehumanize us, deconstruct us, and then rebuild us into the image of like a robot who doesn't need to play, who doesn't need to go to concerts, who doesn't need to go to libraries, who doesn't need to go to the ice skating rink, who doesn't need Christmas, who doesn't need Halloween, who doesn't need to go to parks, who doesn't need to bicycle, who doesn't need to ride a city bus across town to go do errands, who doesn't need to socialize with other people, who doesn't need to dance, whether it's a square dance or a waltz. You don't need to do any of that because you're a robot.
Right.
You're a robot that they need to take information from so that they can maintain their power. And lately, and then we'll end here, but lately what I've been saying is that so that the wealthy can continue to gain wealth based on the information that we provide them. Because at the end of the day, we're teaching the automation. The automation is learning from us, and soon the automation will replace us. That's why the whole population reduction agenda is so very real, and that's something you should think about. And how you're teaching the automation.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen it yet, go to our YouTube page and look up The Great Reset. video that we produced a few months earlier in the last month.
Yeah, and so one thing that
talks about that.
One thing that I've been getting wrong, well, not quite wrong. One thing that I've been getting a little bit wrong is that, you know, I've been saying, and so all of this is happening, this automation, population reduction, dehumanizing, deconstructing the human being. In order to deconstruct a human being, you need to control a human being, and all this stuff. I've been saying that it's because they want to maintain and grow their wealth, when really they have all the wealth. They generate a fiat currency with abandon. They just literally like print money out of thin air. They have all the wealth. Mark Zuckerberg has like 17 different homes, and he has a portion of a private island, and they all have the wealth. They already have it. So what is it? What they want is power. They want complete power. They want to play God. They're playing God with our lives. They're telling you, most likely the vaccine will be some kind of, it'll be a combination of many different agendas or campaigns. One will be a sterilization campaign to reduce the population. Another will be to change your DNA so that you can be fully tracked and fully uploaded into kind of a matrix-like system. And also something that Allison said today, which you should look at as well, is that it won't be you that they so much care about. It's going to be your avatar. It's going to be the version of you that's on your account and on your screen. And that's the thing that's going to get the badges to help you improve your station in life and all this stuff. So this is all about dehumanization, not for wealth, which is what I've been saying. It was so that they can continue to make lots and lots of money off of us like we're slaves. No, it's for power. They want power, and they want to play God. And I'll even take it a little bit further, and this maybe I shouldn't because I might sound crazy, but I think they're getting bored with this planet. I think they want to create a new kind of being that's able to explore, to go out into space and literally explore new worlds.
So that they don't have to.
And, maybe this is the fact that I'm reading the book We, and that's influencing my thought process. But in the book We, which I read on Facebook Live every Thursday at 3:00, and I read just a tiny portion of it. It's done in entries, not chapters, and each entry is sometimes only 2 pages. But in the book We, each individual is known as a number, so as opposed to a name. So they're dehumanized, and they have no real emotion, and they're going out there and exploring new worlds. And the architect of the ship that's gone out there, kind of like the Enterprise in Star Trek, he's going out there to grab people and bring them into their very controlled, very monitored society, which is called the One State. So that might be influencing my thought, but I feel like that's the goal. The goal is not necessarily to be like super wealthy and to excoriate everything out of us to make money off of. It's power. It's for power, but also to have sort of a godlike, let's create new worlds. The Bible says something like, the world was created in 7 days, and God said, and da da da. Now I believe in creationism, or I believe in evolution, not creationism. So I think it took millions of years, but they want to play God. They want to create new worlds. They want to create new life forms. And that goes way beyond your how many houses you own, or how many islands you own, or how much money you have in your bank account. It goes way beyond that. So that's the kind of people we're dealing with right now. We're dealing with people that want to take you, an individual, rip you apart, literally rend you, rip you apart, find the thing that works for them. Oh, this works. And then, like Frankenstein, put together a new type of person, so that person can be like in their image, like this idea of what a perfect individual would be. It would be a combination of like a machine and man, and maybe a little animal, and definitely someone tracked. So these are some long-term goals that they have, and we're at the very beginning stages of that.
And those a lot of the investments that we're talking about are part of that, right?
Exactly.
But I think ultimately, though, what they're using people for and the children is to build the infrastructure for the next phase in our world. Ultimately, they want robots to do everything, and with the artificial intelligence software and the robotics that have been going on, that will actually happen to the point where we're starting to see these things take place already. Medicine is going to be practiced by robots, where they can be, and create. AI can make art. You're going to have AI teachers, education, and I already saw a robot. A robot that was weeding a field, right? So now you don't even need migrant workers, okay,
right,
to do the work. And it was this weird contraption. It was really tall, had wheels, and then it had these arms with like these little, fingers that were like pulling up little weeds. And it was also applying herbicide around things. So and I'm sure it was like Monsanto, right? Because you don't want to kill the plants that you're trying to grow, but you do want to kill the weeds, right? So it was really pretty funky.
And we taught, human beings taught the automation to do that. How would the automation know how to do that if they hadn't recorded the human beings, the migrant workers who were picking the weeds and throwing them away, covering what they needed to salvage with the herbicide. So you record that, you put that formula into robotics or into automation, and then they can just do it. And that's everything about our life is being done that way. So we're teaching the software.
And we talk about that in the Great Reset. So go back if you haven't seen it. And if you have seen it, go back and refresh your memory. It's an interesting, it's a good video. I like it. Yeah. Okay. So
thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yep.
It looks like we're just a little over. So that's awesome. I will talk to you next time.
Yep.
Okay. Have a good week. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Book of Hours is determined to remain an essential platform that offers a creative interpretation for lockdown skeptics and experts who have been censored by mainstream press. Thanks to your donations, we can carry on doing this essential work as working artists. These big issues of the day are vital and need to be heard. So please share our videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel, make a one-time donation on our PayPal page, but most importantly, please be a part of our team on our Patreon page. Go to patreon.com/bookofhours and hit the blue button titled Become a Patron. Thank you.